and tyranny, and other times it was far worse. So that's the way it works. You could try socialism. We as a species have tried all these different ways to stop other private interests or other barons or rich people or whatever from controlling the poor, but it doesn't work because it can't work. And the state is the problem. I mean, they've tried.
Well, so now are you saying then just turn it over to these barons?
Turn what over? Turn what over?
Security, at a minimum.
But
right?
see, the security apparatus that we think of.
That's what everybody says. Look, if there's no government here to prevent another one from replacing it, then it'll immediately devolve into like H.G. Wells, the King of Michigan, and he's at war all the time and whatever. That it'll just be smaller warlords instead of the big ones we have.
Well, that can happen. You can have smaller warlords, and I'm not for warlords of any sort. But the problem is that a state is just a warlord that people put up with. That's what when you're embracing the state, you're embracing the idea that that one criminal gang has to be made non-criminal to stop the other criminal gangs from being criminal, and it's always bad. So if you don't like people being pushed around, look, the question is what the debate about whether to turn it over to private enterprise. Turn what over? Are we talking about turning over the idea of the law, of how we deal with legal questions, how we deal with national defense? Or are we talking about the actual infrastructure and the policies? Because of course we don't want to privatize the war on drugs. For example, the war on drugs is evil. You don't privatize the war in Afghanistan because it's evil. But these things can't be done privately. You need taxes because they cost more money than they bring in.
Dick Cheney actually committed the high treason of going to a foreign country to complain about his own government's foreign policy. Nobody Dixie chicked him at the time. But he went to Australia and he complained about Bill Clinton's sanctions against Iran in 1998. And he said, hey, we're all businessmen here. What the hell? I'm trying to make some money. And these sanctions are in my way. The Iranians are people, too. We can do business with them. And then, of course, once he becomes president, dictator in chief, really, him and David Addington up there with the commander-in-chief clause in full effect, torturing people to death. It's, he did everything he could to get us into a war with Iran.
Well, yeah, and Dick Cheney's a great example. Horrible man, but in the private sector, his own greed makes him humanitarian by any measurement, at least compared to what he's like when he's in power, which is a mass butcher. Or what about?
And he's got all these flags and yellow ribbons and team spirit and all this stuff behind him, where he's not just forcing us all to pay to send the army overseas. The army is, our neighbors' kids, if not ours,
Sure. And even even his most of his political opponents will say, well, but we respect the office, we respect the democracy, so we have to. It's horrible. Another good example of this is, in the fog of war, where we have McNamara, and there's the interlude between when he's working on, butchering Japanese and when he's eventually becomes more famous for butchering Vietnamese. There's this whole period where he's in the automotive industry, and people talk about this segment in the movie and how he's corrupt and he ends up, and yeah, of course, he's corrupt, and it's not a purely free market there either, by the way, but isn't it better than what he was doing when he was serving the public? Yes.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
And there was accountability, right? He lost his position.
Yeah, he lost his position.
That was why he went back to government.
That's why he went back to government. That's why he decided to enter public service again. And, there were millions of Vietnamese and Cambodians and Laotians who died thanks to him and his fellow servants. So that's public service, and it can't be reformed. You can, and I would hope to one day live under a state that's less bad, and not all states are always at war outright, but to the extent you have a state, you have jails, you have police brutality, you have people being impoverished, you have the economy being dragged down, you have winners and losers being picked for political reasons rather than for serving customers. The state is a scam, And, our state is one of the biggest scams in the world, especially given its rhetoric, but they're all bad, and there's no way to fix them because they're not broken. This is what they are. The Empire in Star Wars, it wasn't broken. It's not that the Empire needed to be fixed so it was stop blowing up planets. That's the function of an empire, and it's the function of the state.
Well, it also didn't overthrow the Republic. It was the Republic, just grown up all the way. That's all.
Right, that's true. And I hope people really get the lesson from the. If they get anything from those very mediocre prequels, at least some of the politics is kind of good. I don't think they handled it that well, but the story, I know. I don't know if I'm allowed to diss the prequels on your show.
Oh, please go right ahead. Yeah, no,
I know.
No, but yeah, I mean, it is the story of how the Republic becomes the Empire, and that's what Lucas always said was, he wasn't interested so much in, one country getting conquered by another or something like that. He was interested in how do you get people who are nominally free to give up their freedom and to love it, and, talking about Rome and Germany as examples where people basically turned power over to those who they knew were to be dictators. You know what I mean? They killed Julius Caesar, but then the Senate still gave the total power to his nephew.
Yeah, and I remember the great Harry Brown when people were all worried that the Muslims were going to take over the country, and in 2001 and 2002 when we needed him and he was there, saying all the right stuff. But one thing he would say is, what are you afraid of? That they're going to take over, that they're going to tax half our wealth, that they're going to force us into a retirement system that doesn't work, that they're going to indoctrinate our kids, that they're going to jail people for doing nonviolent things. Now, of course, the fact is we would never be a Muslim theocracy here because the culture wouldn't put up with it, but we can be this kind of secular theocracy or whatever we got, and in a lot of ways it's not quite as bad as the Taliban. But
it's Abraham Lincoln is the god of this thing.
Lincoln. But we're already conquered is the point. We've already we don't need to be worried about being conquered by a murderous empire or murderous regime. We have been, and most of us almost most of us still show up at the polls and cheer the thing on, and they think that they're trying. Right now we're on the brink of the Republicans probably taking back over, but it's just I don't see how anyone could believe that it matters at all at this point which party wins these elections. But we can talk whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be right back.